Hi, I'm Faz from Hemmingfords and welcome to our weekly Hemmingfords podcast. So today I've got Dan, our mortgage man, and he'll be telling us a little bit about the mortgage market. So Dan, tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a mortgage broker.
Yeah, well, long time ago, probably nearly 20 years now.
Okay.
Started working part-time for a local mortgage broker that I live near in Watford, where I grew up. Started part-time, had the option to go to either university or they offered to pay for my mortgage qualifications, CMAP exams, and then sort of move into advice and mortgage broking. So decided to go down that route rather than university. Kind of always knew I wanted to go into finance. I felt that was a easier step than the university way. And yeah, not look back, and that was 2003, 2004 when I qualified, a long time ago.
And for the viewers that don't know too much about mortgages, what is a mortgage and why do people have them?
Yeah, well, essentially the mortgage is the finance or the loan that allows you to buy a property. So the bank will take a charge on the house, that's why it's linked to the property you're buying, whether that be for your own residence or an investment. Majority of people when they buy a property will be with a mortgage. Not everyone's fortunate enough to have enough cash to buy a property outright, and taking a mortgage gives you the option of buying a property now rather than maybe renting or trying to save up, because it might take a long time to get enough cash to buy a property. Right. So a bank or mortgage lender will come along and offer you the finance if you pass their criteria. Of course they'll charge an interest and costs for doing that, and you'll spread the mortgage typically over 25, 30, 40 years to make the payments affordable, and then you'll slowly pay down that mortgage over the years. So having a mortgage allows you to buy sooner, with a view of sort of paying the debt down over your working lifetime. And that's why people sort of prefer to do it that way than save up for years.
And the typical term, you would say?
Yeah, well traditionally I think many years ago it was always 25 years. I think a combination of debts are a bit higher now than they were. People are having to borrow more because housing prices have increased. And people are working a bit longer as well. So the maximum term with most banks is actually 40 years, allowing people to spread it and give yourself a lower payment. Or if you're planning to retire earlier than sort of 70 seems to be typical, then they might do a little bit shorter. But yeah, maximum is 40 years now.
Nice. And what would you say is perhaps the average deposit, or is that quite
No, yeah, I would say mainly first-time buyers, depending on sort of whether they got a gift from parents. Bank of mum and dad is obviously very popular, and if parents can help out, that normally bolsters the deposit. So I would say it's usually on average 15 to 20% from savings and parents' gifts, which means the bigger deposit you can put down, the interest rate is slightly better because it's less risk for the bank. So yeah, typically 15 to 20%, I would say.
When would you say is a good sort of time for someone to reach out to a mortgage broker in their whole sort of search process?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm always a fan of as soon as possible. You know, even if someone, and I do have some clients who say, I'm not thinking of buying for the rest of this year, it might be next year. There's absolutely no harm in having a chat with a mortgage broker as early as you can. Sometimes it can be beneficial that you could borrow more than you realised, so it's a good thing. Sometimes actually you might not be able to borrow as much as you thought, so you may have to readjust your property budgets. And having that chat now gives you, make sure you're looking in the right property range. Of course, when you are then ready to buy in 6 months, a year's time, things may have changed. So a broker will reassess that. Your salary may have gone up, you might have saved up a bit more money, but from a high level conversation, there's no downside in having a chat as early as you can.
Sure, nice, yeah, because I remember when I was looking for my property, somebody advised me to reach out to a mortgage broker pretty much even like sort of at the beginning of the search. Some of my friends have done it a little bit earlier, and then some maybe leave it a little bit too late, and then maybe you don't have as much options or as many people to sort of compare to. So yeah,
exactly. So no, earlier the better, because you're not tied into anything. It's just a chat and a review.
What could they expect from the whole mortgage process?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd sort of break it down into 3 main sections, really. You've got the pre-checks before you sort of start searching and making offers. Then you've got the mortgage application process, and then really you've got the legal process. So the first stage, which we kind of touched on a moment ago about having those chats, a mortgage broker can look to do what's called the approval in principle or mortgage in principle. So AIP, MIP, depending on which bank, different phrasing. But essentially that is a credit check and an assessment of your affordability, and a confirmation that in principle the bank would say, yes, based on your salary, your credit score, we can lend you X amount. So it gives you that confirmation you're looking in the right area.
And that's quite common when people are putting offers in place. Agencies will generally ask for an agreement in principle, just to give some sort of idea as to roughly the sort of the amount that they want to to lend on the property, right?
Correct, exactly. And it can help you when you speak to an estate agent to reassure them, oh, I've had my mortgage and principals done, I'm in a good position, because no one wants a transaction where someone may think they can get a mortgage and then it takes 2 or 3 weeks, maybe longer, and the mortgage doesn't come through because they've overlooked something and something's gone wrong. It's disappointing for everyone involved, because the buyer may have spent money on a legals or a survey and then it doesn't go through. Obviously the seller, from an estate agent's point of view, will be disappointed because then they have to remarket the property. So I think for everyone involved, it's that pre-check to give you that confirmation that I can get it done, and it is what's called a soft check as well, so it doesn't affect your credit score. So there's literally no downside to doing it. Gives you that peace of mind, and as you mentioned, estate agents are likely to ask you to have, if you've got one anyway. So always recommend getting one of those in place. Yeah.
Sure. And from actually getting the actual mortgage offer finally issued, it usually lasts for a maximum of 6 months. Is that correct across the board of all banks?
Correct, yeah, pretty much. So that's the kind of middle stage we were talking about. So you've got your mortgage and principal set, you're out looking, made your offer. Once that's accepted, you then apply for the full mortgage. Now, that process is around maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get the full approval, because at that stage it is just as okay in principle. So it's a credit check and a high level review. Once you've had your offer accepted, the bank will check everything. So I'll have to upload pay slips, bank statements, ID for them to review, and of course they'll assess the property as well to make sure the value's correct and there's no structural damage or any issues or anything like that. So that's why it takes the bank maybe 2 to 3 weeks during that process. But providing that all goes as planned, at the end of that they will issue the mortgage offer. That's then confirmation that the bank, we're happy to lend not just to you but also the property. And that document is valid for 6 months. So that then gives you the remaining 5.5 months, whatever's left, to finalise the legal paperwork. So hands over to that stage 3 that I was saying, which is the legal paperwork and the lawyers and things like that.
And the process of the actual valuation itself might not always be an in-person one, right? Sometimes if they've got enough data, they might be able to carry it out via desktop. Is that?
Absolutely, yeah. So during that 2 to 3 week process, to say one half is approving you as the buyer, the other half is the property. If the bank have enough online data or internal data, because law of averages, if you apply to a particular bank, they may already have the mortgage on the house you're buying. Just sometimes happens, or one next door or nearby, or a flat in the same block. So they may have a rough idea of what the property's worth. If they do, and I'd say at the moment we're seeing 20, maybe 25% of cases that the bank will just approve the property remotely. So from their own data, their own office. And when they can do that, the whole process probably cuts down from 2 to 3 weeks to probably a week, because then it's really just about approving your documents.
And Dan, what would you say the benefits are of using a mortgage broker such as yourself, or going directly to, say, a high street bank?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. This question comes up a fair amount from clients. I bank with a certain bank, I was just going to go to them. So the main and obvious one that people will probably know is, we use multiple banks, so we can search with the software tools we've got various different interest rates at different banks. So, statistically, what are the chances that the bank you're with happen to offer the best deal that day? Law of averages, probably another bank has got a slightly better rate. So we can shop those rates. But the other benefit really is around the structure, So as a mortgage advisor, it's about talking through the whole process. So it's not just, I need to borrow this amount over 25 years. My job is to kind of discuss with the client what could change in the future. So do we want to structure it over 40 years like we talked about earlier? Do you want to do a shorter mortgage? Do you want to try and make overpayments? Do you know of any future changes that could affect, you and the mortgage? So are you selling other assets, other properties or shares, or a family member, passing funds to you where you might want to pay that off the mortgage? So my role kind of comes more in that structure side of having that conversation about, okay, it might turn out that we go to the same bank you were thinking of, but it's giving you ideas about the budget for the monthly payment, what am I going to do in the future, and kind of talking through those kind of options.
So you could argue it's a bit more of a bespoke sort of service in that regard, and that maybe you will have access to a larger basket of maybe a bit more choice when it comes to maybe giving the correct product for, say the buyer, as opposed to maybe being limited to just one bank.
Absolutely, yeah. That's it. It's a combination of having a wider spread of lenders available, different type of products as well, and then obviously coming up with the ways to structure it to make it easier for them. But then the other side of the mortgage broker process is that service and sort of contactability. If you go to your bank, you may have to have an appointment in branch. You may have to go in at a certain time during working hours. As a mortgage broker, most of us are pretty flexible with our time. If someone wants to speak in the evening or weekends and things like that come to an office in London, then we can work around them, and it's something that maybe the high street banks can't always do. So it's that kind of flexibility side, and then it's the service you get. So it's providing the customer with regular updates on where the application is during the process, has the valuation been done, has my documents been improved, and helping them through, even with the legal paperwork as well. So once the mortgage offer is in place, our job isn't done. We're still here to help you with the solicitors. You know, if the solicitor feeds back and says, "Oh, I've sent in a message to the bank, I've not heard back," you know, we can get on the phone and try and chase and help. Whereas if you've gone direct to the bank, your front line, they might not be able to help you as much as we can. So it's that whole kind of service piece as well as not just the interest rate, I would say.
I've heard in the past where like you might be filling out a questionnaire or something, but it's like computer says no sort of thing, and they might get deferred, or then you just got to maybe go elsewhere or something. But it's good to hear.
Yeah, and the other one that's always important is the property, especially in London. You know, a lot of people will think that every bank will lend the same on every property, and it isn't like that. You know, you may bank with your particular bank since you were 18, you've had a Premier account with them for the last 10, 15 years, and they've approved you, not a problem, but the property you've chosen, they're not happy to lend on. So in central London, as you know, it might be above a shop, a restaurant, a cafe, it might be a block of flats that's above 4 stories. Some banks will only lend on maximum of 4 stories. So you could go to your bank, be approved quickly, and then the valuation comes back and they say no. Whereas when dealing with a mortgage broker, they should have known that at the start. Oh, you're looking at this lender, well actually I don't think they're going to lend on that property. So it's a bit more wider than always, you know, the property comes into it as well.
Can you give some examples of some obstacles that you've come across and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, a good example kind of touched on is a property. I had a client who came to me after already applying for a mortgage with his own bank. It was a leasehold house, which is quite rare. Normally houses are freehold and flats are leasehold. So it's just doing a bit of research, speaking to a few different banks, found one that said, yep, that we can potentially do that. Of course, as I said earlier, it's down to the valuation. They will go and see the house. And they came back and approved the mortgage within sort of 2.5 weeks. When he was very grateful because the bank who he banked with was one of the big high street brands, but they just don't lend on leasehold houses. So at that point he was worried that he couldn't get the mortgage. So to find a lender that can do it quickly and approve the property, you know, he was over the moon with that. So that's a good specific example. The other obstacles I would say that's more general, kind of touched on it with solicitors in the middle. You know, as a mortgage broker, our job essentially is that middle person. So the mortgage offer might be in place, but the lawyers, you know, will do their job and they'll pick things up within the contracts and documents. So they may need to go back to the lender and say, oh look, the lease has got, you know, a covenant or some kind of term in there that's quite rare, and they want to check that with the bank. And some banks and some solicitors still use fax machines, believe it or not. So some email and things like that, but sometimes faxes go missing, emails go missing. So they're waiting for a response from the bank and no one's sure what's happening. So that I'd say is the more general obstacle, is we are there in the background to chase the lawyer, make sure how did they send it, speak to the bank, this is how, have you now got it? Yes, we have. Great, I'll call you tomorrow. Oh, you've now responded. Great, go back to the lawyers. So that's the kind of unseen work that the clients will know about, because you'll update them, you'll say, look, we're chasing. But again, if you don't have that mortgage broker and you go direct to the bank, you don't really know, not where you can push boundaries, but can I ring the lawyers? Can I ring the bank? Can I get them talking? Because banks are very busy, solicitors are very busy. They'll do their part and then they may not always have time to chase things up. So I think that's the kind of general obstacle we see as a broker regularly. It's just trying to get everything together to get you to exchange and on a completion.
Yeah, that ties in very, very nicely with the whole sale progression process as the agent itself. Just making sure that everyone's really, like, the communication's been kept, managing everybody's expectations and stuff. So
and from an agent's point of view,
hear it from your side as well.
you can obviously chase the solicitors, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to chase the bank. So again, we can work together, and if you get a good estate agent and broker liaising with each other, I can then chase the bank, you can chase the lawyers, and it's all, at the end of the day, we're just trying to get the transaction completed as smoothly as possible for the buyers and the sellers. Another couple of points on sort of obstacles overcoming is complex income. You know, sometimes you'll get clients whose income is not sort of mainstream. You know, they may be paid in foreign currency, they may be self-employed, and they only draw a certain amount of profit out of their business. They could get awarded bonuses in stocks and things like that. So, you know, you get clients who don't think they can borrow necessarily or find it difficult, when actually, when you know the right lenders for the right bank, that obstacle is quite easily overcome, because you're going to the right bank first of all, who will consider that style of income. Whereas if you're doing it by yourself, you may go to your bank or have a look online, and then you're kind of speaking to each bank and being told, well, no, this is our policy, we need 3 years accounts, or no, we won't use your euro income. So you're doing the searching, whereas a good broker should know off the top of their head. We don't know every single, there's hundreds of lenders out there, but the main lenders who sort of cover 75%, I believe, of the market, those high street brands that we all know, most brokers will kind of know their main criteria. So based on your income structure, we can save you time by going straight to the right bank.
Amazing, very thorough. Why should someone pick you as their mortgage broker?
Really good question. I'd say my main 2 points I would say about myself is service and then structure. We kind of talked on structure earlier. So, from a service point of view, I'm contactable, email, phone, evenings and weekends if needs be. I like to keep clients updated. Any client that hopefully I've done a good job for would feed back and say, look, I was kept up to date throughout the entire process, which is a good thing. And the other one is that structure we mentioned, and it's me asking questions about, are you planning to change something? Are you going to change job? Are you starting a family? Will you have some money coming in? And, I don't want to seem like I'm being nosy, but my job is to ask those questions because it can help. I have clients who say, oh yeah, we've got a property, we were thinking of selling that investment in 18 months. Well, actually that impacts what we're doing today. Let's look at the mortgage product we're going for based on what's coming up in the near future. So I think a combination between good service and also, helping you structure the mortgage in the right way, I would say the main things from myself. And then the third one maybe is follow-ups. I'm pretty good at staying in contact with clients. Most people, as I'm sure you know from the conversations, are going for fixed rates at the moment. Now, a fixed rate will have an end at some point, so your mortgage might be 25, 30 years, but you may have only fixed in for 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it may be. So I will reach out to people during that period just to check in. Do you have any questions about the mortgage I can help with? Anything's changed? And also, you can secure a new interest rate 6 months in advance. Not a lot of people realise that. So I normally outbound people about 7 months before.
So you'll follow up 7 months before the
end of the 2 years, end of the 3 years.
Term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because you want to try and get organised. Now, at the moment, we're in a market where interest rates seem to be going downwards, but that's not always the case. And if they're going upwards, a good mortgage broker getting in contact with you and securing a new rate 6 months early, so say in a January rather than in June, when your mortgage is coming up in July, that interest rates could have moved hugely in that 6 month period or 5 month period. So I think I'm pretty good at staying in contact with people and being at the end of a phone, even once the mortgage has started, because you want to help your clients throughout the 25 years, not just on that first transaction.
And would you also say people are turning more to a fixed rate because, the interest rates were pretty much at quite as low for quite a long time, and then they sort of shot up a little bit, and then people are now not willing to take the risk? What would you...
Yeah, I think at the moment, most people like stability, peace of mind. Most people want to know my payments are set for at least 2, 3, 5 years. I think with the variable rate, as we've seen what's happened over the last few years, rates can go up almost overnight. So that, it doesn't give people a lot of security. So most people are leaning towards the fixed rates. Most people do know, but in case they don't, you can still make lump sum overpayments, even if you're in a fixed rate mortgage. Nearly all lenders allow 10% overpayment allowance, so that's 10% of your mortgage. On top of your direct debits that are going out, you can pay a lump sum of 10% each of the year of the fixed rates. So actually, I think with that flexibility that normally comes with a variable mortgage, you've got a little bit of flexibility, but the peace of mind of knowing my payments aren't going to change. I think that's the main reason why most people are leaning towards fixed rates.
What would you say one of your biggest success stories are for one of your clients?
Well, I think the main point, and it's for a few clients, is that ability to buy. Some people, the success comes from the first conversation, oh, look, I don't think I can buy a property. I think because of my income, because of this, I don't think I can. And then when you give them the news that, no, I think there are a few lenders that would do this for you, and then jump forward 3 months later, they've got the keys and they're moving in, they're absolutely over the moon. So that's probably the best success story that I could say. And a few examples, I had a client who was paid in a foreign currency. It wasn't euros or US dollars, which are the main ones banks will consider. So she didn't think she could buy a property now. So she was looking at moving her business, and she would work remotely, moving business to the UK and sort of restructuring income in pounds. But as it happened, that was going to take a bit of time. So she was thinking, I need to do that first. As it happens, we could finance it for her now. She's now in the property. She's now changing her income. So at the end of her fixed rate, she will then have pound sterling income, and that opens up a lot more lenders, absolutely. But she's bought now rather than having to wait and rent for a couple more years, which was her plan, which she was worried about when we first had the conversation. Similar story, again, not thinking they can buy. I've had a couple of clients self-employed, whether they only just started the business, they've only got their first year's accounts, Most banks want to see 2 years accounts, some want to see 3. You know, 2 examples I can think where we've had the first year's accounts and then we've had a projection from the accountant to say we're already 3 months into the second year, and this is what the numbers are looking like. There are some banks that will look at that qualified accountant, they'll kind of trust the way the client's income is going. So they are able to buy now rather than thinking, again, it's at least 1 year or maybe 2 years of building my income through the business before I can even think about a mortgage. And they're good ones because, you know, once they move in, they send you an email because they're over the moon because you've saved them 2 years worth of paying rent because they bought property now. So they're probably the biggest success stories that you enjoy when someone doesn't think it's possible, but you give them some good news.
I love that. It's like coming back to what you said before and having that bit more tailored, bespoke service as opposed to going to, say, the high street bank that maybe wasn't able to give you that sort of advice.
Exactly that. You could go to your own bank and say, and again, going back to what I've said before, I've had clients I've banked with them for 20 years, I'm a Premier account holder. If their policy is they want 3 years self-employment or 2 years accounts, they're not able to move it for you, sadly. But another bank next door may be able to do it, and that's where a broker comes in, where we can go to the right bank for the right, you know, bespoke, as you say, right client, and go to the right bank.
So thanks for speaking with us today, Dan, and we'll see you at the next one.